listening to Represent, the queermusicals.com podcast. Hello and welcome to Represent, the queermusicals.com podcast. I'm here with two guests today and I shall get them to introduce themselves. So Jess, do you want to start?
Hi, my name is Jessica Aubrey and I'm currently in Wicked the Musical.
Yay!
Yay!
And Josh?
And hi, I am Josh Clemetson and I am also in Wicked the Musical.
Yay! And I am not in Wicked the Musical yet, although I'm sure I would be an excellent Madame Morrible should it come up. Yes, I was going to ask you about some of the other roles that you've played because you've done some very exciting stuff. So what other things have you done, Jess?
So I started off my career on Royal Caribbean's cruise ship, the Harmony of the Seas, and I played Sandy in Greece, which was
lovely.
Just a dream job. Yeah, we had 3 shows of Greece a week and 3 shows of Columbus a week, so we're working 5-day weeks, touring the Caribbean, having the most beautiful time, making amazing friendships. And I think it's such a good job to do straight out of college because you get this amazing false sense of extreme confidence in yourself. And we got to do cabaret nights where you could just find your sound and find yourself and and make incredible friends for life. And then I came back and I went to Disneyland Paris for a little bit and I was friends with Elsa from Disneyland, from Frozen. She's amazing.
Nice.
The key word there is friends with. And then I came back, and obviously then we had the pandemic, which is a whole topic. I swung for the first time in Bedknobs and Broomsticks. But I'd love to mention my favourite show that I've been in. Is that biased? Yes. But I'm a cheerleader. I got to play Megan in this incredible queer show, actually talking about some very serious topics, and actually conversion therapy is still legal in many, many countries, so it was making this beautiful musical about something really quite awful, but not making it a woe is me or a tragic ending, having this wonderful, probably rare, but not rare, because, this incredible story, and getting to play Megan, who I think I had a lot of similarities to growing up. Very good girl, doing my grades, very good at sport, and questioning myself very silently and not feeling quite free to be my queer self. And Megan goes on this incredible journey, and my co-star Meg Hill they're just incredible as Graham, and I'm just so proud to be part of that wonderful show. And now I'm in my dream show of all time, which is Wicked, and just having a really cool time. That's
amazing. We definitely will come back to talk more about Cheerleader. Yes. Definitely.
Sorry,
Josh.
Jess, you also forgot to add as cover Elphaba.
Oh. It's little Jess is so incredibly proud. This year they've introduced a brand new third cover that I don't believe has ever happened anywhere yet.
Oh, she's the first.
Which is really cool.
So
I've just had my cover on last week, so I'm still on a massive high, and it's just really cool. And sometimes you gotta. I asked actually very boldly last year. I went to Petra when we were having a time when I think Elphaba was just such a demanding role. No one would deny that. And we were having a time when some people hadn't been rehearsed in yet, and we had some external Elphabas coming in. And I went to Petra and said, "Hey, just putting it out there, if you ever wanted to have a third cover Elphaba, I'd love to put myself in the mix." And she very kindly laughed it off like a wonderful, kind gesture. And I don't know whether that planted the seed or my constant badgering her. But eventually they let me audition for cover Glinda, cover Elphaba, and I mean, the cover on was absolutely incredible. And if I get to go on, that would be the best thing ever. But I'm very proud of myself. Thank you, Josh. Yeah. I think everyone in the cast was rooting for it, and I feel very, very lucky.
I'm now visualising you going around the theatre, just breaking in, refusing to speak, but only in lines that Elphaba sings.
You're not far off.
I think if you look through my Instagram, it's, oh wow, another Elphaba cover. Oh wow, is she trying to tell us something? But hey, not that I want to. No, I do want to say it. If you put yourself out there, and if you are proud of your work, and if you want to tell someone that you're right for something that they don't think you are, do it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Excellent stuff. And Josh, what about you? Let's have a little resume from you.
Okay, let's see. So I feel so blessed to have done the jobs that I've done. I graduated from arts ed into the pandemic, so we had no clue really what was going to be happening with theatre at the time. And as I was graduating, I'd booked a job. I was supposed to do Hello Dolly in the original cast at the Adelphi.
Okay, yeah.
And all throughout that first lockdown, we were thinking, it's still going to happen, it's still going to happen. And then inevitably it did. Plans were paused.
Yeah.
And then Richard Fitch, who did one of my third year shows at Arts Ed, he was the director on Back to the Future.
Okay.
And I remember him telling me about it because they were doing it in Manchester at the time as like a small run to kind of figure out what it was. And then sure enough, around August time, David Grinrod messages me and he says, I think I have something that you'd be really perfect for. Ooh. And he sent me some times because you can't tell anyone what it is because at the time no one knew that it was actually making the transfer to London because again it shut down in Manchester because of COVID, and it was for Goldie Wilson. And so I came in, it was one of the best, fastest auditions I'd ever done before. And so I'm so happy to say that my first job ever was first cover Goldie Wilson in the original London cast of Back to the Future.
Yeah.
And
Great.
it was
So cool.
It was such a dream job because I think in musical theatre, we all have this checklist of things that we would, eventually love to check off. And I did every single one of them in this job. It was my first job, West End debut, covering a lead. We did a cast album. We did the What's on Stage Awards and the Olivier Awards and won Best New Musical for both. We did West End Live. We did the big night of the O2 musicals in Manchester. And I got to perform on that stage as well.
Wow.
There were so many things that I dreamed of doing, and it all was just amalgamated in this one job. So that was a dream job. Then after that one, I went on to do a tour of The Color Purple, which is a show that has meant so much to me, like just the music, the message, the feeling of being around a bunch of people of a similar background to you, similar ethnicity, and also telling what is at its core a queer love story between Celie and Suge, and how through finding yourself and finding your voice and connecting to the person that you are on the inside, which I think a lot of us can kind of relate to, you kind of put out into the world the person that you want to be. And it's so beautiful and inspiring when you see someone realize the person they're supposed to do. And I think that's so special of a message, especially in this Pride Month that we're going through right now. Everyone can kind of reflect on the person that they want to be and be proud and celebrate the pride of experiencing that joy. Then after The Color Purple, I did my first ever panto.
Yay!
I was a dwarf in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs at the New Wimbledon Theatre, and I love telling people that I shouldn't say this. I love telling people that I made money over Christmas working on my knees.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride. And then after that, I found myself in Wicked as first cover Bog.
Yes.
And Wicked was actually the first ever musical I saw in person when I first moved to the UK 10 years ago now. That's crazy, 10 years ago. And I remember at the time thinking to myself, this is crazy. Like the costumes, the light, the music, the magic. I was so blown away because I'd always heard of musical theater, but in Texas, where I'm from, it's not really a thing. It's more like show choirs, I think Glee.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, I want to do this. So it's really cool.
Oh, it sounds great. So I was going to ask you a little bit about, you've talked about this a little bit already, but thinking about being seen on stage and representation, which is what this podcast is about, really. So thinking about roles that have really meant a lot to you, or shows that you've seen or that you've been in that you've been really inspired by. So who would like to go first?
Yeah.
So one show that will always have a place in my heart, and I've always told people that if I don't get to play this role, my career is not over. So I will be 78 years old still going to auditions if I do not get to play Lola from Kinky Boots. I have seen Kinky Boots more times than any other show I think I've ever seen. I think I've honestly seen it about 8 or 9 times. And I think it's so telling of the kind of story that it is. There's so few musicals, I think, especially when it comes to, gay queer characters that really do have a happy ending, which is kind of unfortunate because I think it's very telling of the way that we are perceived, like in life, by outside people and by our own community. I think it's really sad, but it would be silly to ignore the fact that a lot of people, don't really typically get to have that happy ending. And I think Kinky Boots is a world that you can fully escape in, and you see the hardships that these characters go through, and they're very real hardships that people can relate to. Not being accepted by a father, not being accepted by, friends and family, feeling like you have to tone down yourself on the outward to be accepted by the people that you're surrounding, but ultimately thinking to myself, no, I'm going to be who I want to be. And it goes to show that when you are your authentic self, it influences the people around you and it allows them to be their authentic selves. One of my favorite part of the whole musical is when Charlie puts on the heels at the very end and he goes to strut outside on the catwalk. He stumbles around like Bambi a little bit, and then, Lola and the angels come in and they have this beautiful moment. But it just goes to show you that, like, he wouldn't have done that at the start of the musical if he didn't meet that character Lola. And Lola wouldn't have done certain things. She wouldn't have went and tried to reconcile with her dad at the old person's home if, she didn't have those moments with Charlie. And I just love it. And it's camp. It's so camp. Who doesn't like drag queens in high heels doing kicks? I love it. So if I don't get to play Lola, my career is not over yet.
I think with that role as well, another thing that's really important is that it's a black queer character. Yeah. And one of the things that I've been struggling with my research is finding particularly black male queer characters or black non-binary queer characters that are explicitly, because we've mentioned Celia and Shug from The Colour Purple. Not that there's a huge amount for queer females either, actually black queer females, but that's one of the things, because we talk a lot about Kinky Boots with my students. We often talk about Kinky Boots, and I think particularly for my black students, my black queer students, that is a role that is so important, and it's so important because I really struggle to think of other roles that are specifically written for that particular character. So thank you for that, Josh, and I shall look forward to you. I'm sure it'll be way before you're 78. Although the idea of a 78-year-old Lola is fantastic. That would be fabulous.
And I would still get that leg in the air, okay?
Still.
Jess, what about you?
I'm trying to think. I do think there aren't many queer female roles in musical theatre. I do remember watching Rent for the first time on tour, and that musical is obviously just incredible, and I cannot believe it wasn't made now. The fact that it was so it's just beautiful and isn't demonstrative and isn't performative. It's just what it is, and I just loved watching these two lesbian and bisexual characters just being, and the point wasn't that they were queer. The point was just let's see our lives through this horrendous time, and I just think that was just so eye-opening to me, that it wasn't over-sexualized. I think lesbians can often be a sexy thing and all portrayed from a man's view, and that was just really special to see that. Obviously that musical has so many more messages than what I'm trying to explain right now, but I think that was really special to see that. And I think it was played by two people I'm not sure were queer, which is another topic. But then discovering But I'm a Cheerleader, I originally auditioned for Graham, and I got the role of Graham actually, and then we turned up to rehearsals on day one and they went, what have we done? Like me walking in, they're like, hi everyone. And then Meg walking in completely opposite energy, and the fact that it got to swap around, and all of a sudden it didn't feel like I was playing a character, or it was quite exciting, I think, to play someone quite far from me. Graham is definitely the cloud to the sunshine, but that makes rainbows, and Graham is kind of fed up with the world, whereas Megan is, I guess, in denial for a lot of it, but everything's perfect. So how can I be queer? Because being queer is not perfect. It does not fit in with exactly what society, exactly what mum and dad, exactly what all my friends say that must be if I'm going to be this wonderful, sunny person. And our director, Tanya, sat us down and we spoke about our life growing up, because I think teen musicals are so important. It's so fun to watch because we get to reflect on things that kind of happened to us and that we were a part of, but we didn't really understand and we couldn't process. And that was a lot, and we could see times when we made mistakes, but you're a kid, so it doesn't matter, but it does. And I think it's so healing to watch a show that you can see your younger self in so much. And having to talk about all these things, I was like, oh my goodness, I see so much of Megan in me. And it's taken me a long time to be fully out and happy with my sexuality, because I think, a lot of the world just tells you it's just easier to just be this. And getting to play Megan, finding her strength and finding her resilience and just completely changing everything about her, because this is her and this is beautiful, and how dare you say it's not. And I think the fact that her parents are on board by the end, it makes me absolutely cry thinking about it. And our audiences, I've never experienced anything like it, and I've never felt safer. Just incredible. And having so many queer women, queer non-binary people, straight men, gay men, but mainly queer people, celebrate and watch. And one person actually came out to their mum before coming to watch the show. And I'm not sure it went as amazingly as they were hoping. But I got to meet them afterwards, and how incredibly brave and wonderful are you going to bring your parent to a show that it doesn't. It also, I think, what's beautiful about the show, it doesn't shove down the parents' fault that if you disagree, you're wrong. It's, you will need your time, and I wish you didn't need your time, and I wish you didn't need the discussion. But if you need that, it will come. And love is so beautiful. Why can't we hate? Why do we have to hate love? Yeah. And I think a lot of it came from my personal coming out, where my mum just said, I just, this makes it hard for you. This is going to be harder for you. And I just want you to be happy. But then don't be a part of that hardness. Don't be a part of that world that makes it hard. And she hasn't. She's been amazing. And I just think, and the show has to come back. It has to.
I hope
it's
so.
It's so beautiful. Yeah.
If you're interested in LGBTQ+ representation in musical theatre, check out our website www.queermusicals.com for lots more information about musicals with LGBTQ+ characters. I think the other thing with but I'm a cheerleader, because we've had Tanya on the podcast before.
Isn't she amazing?
She is amazing. And the other thing with it is the idea of queer community, and the idea of it being a mostly queer or a queer majority cast. Yes. And actually, when you were talking about Rent, I think that was the thing, because Rent was something that I was a little bit kind of hot or cold on. I think because I'm very close to the AIDS generation. In fact, I'm the generation just after. And so all I was ever taught is don't be gay because you'll get AIDS and that kind of thing. I found it very difficult to watch that sort of thing. And the time that it really kind of landed with me was in the Hope Mill Theatre production a few years ago, which was where the ensemble was explicitly queer.
Yeah.
And then I realised that this story is a queer story in a queer community. And yes, we don't know the sexuality of Mark and Roger, but actually everybody else. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. This is a queer story, and the queer community are around, and it's the queer community that are supporting. And I felt that as well with But I'm a Cheerleader. And I think, to me, more interesting than the conversation about who should play queer roles, which is an important conversation, but more interesting to me is what do we gain with these when we have a queer community where it's a majority queer cast and creative team. What happens? How does it feel as a performer within that?
I think it's just amazing. And I would say I think I do surround myself with queer people. And I think, unfortunately, that does mean that I live in this wonderful echo chamber of just, such acceptance and such intelligence and such, just wonderful, which is quite shocking then to enter into other conversations. So I don't want to shelter myself in that, but it is wonderful, and doing a show and paying homage to that, and it feels really important and it feels really comfortable, and nothing feels forced or false. And just my favorite, I've never had a dressing room, we all shared a dressing room together, and we were different generations. We were different ages and different backgrounds. But we felt like such a team. And I think it's also quite rare to have a director or who is also identifying as queer, especially a woman. And Tanya was just phenomenal. It felt like we had something important in our hands, and we were so excited to share it with the world, and so excited to share it with people who really wanted to hear it.
I do think as well that when you have a creative team and a cast that are all queer together, the story is told with more care and understanding. That's not to say that, you know, our heteronormative counterparts couldn't do the same, but there's a difference between telling something from an empathetic standpoint and telling a story from a standpoint of a person that may or could experience that kind of hardship. You know, it's so funny that you said a little bit ago that you were very hesitant to watch musicals or stories like that because it was so near and dear, like close to you. I experienced the exact same thing. I only just recently watched Pose for the first time, because for the majority of my life growing up as well, I was too convinced. I was like, I'm gonna get AIDS. Like that's what every story that you watch on TV tells you. That's what every movie or whatever that has a queer or gay man in there, they inevitably get AIDS. That's what I was talking about, how like not a lot of stories that we're told has these happy endings, and that's why we need more happy ending stories. And I am so fortunate and blessed to, you know, be in a time where PrEP and PEP is so readily available. And it's a beautiful thing to know that the amount of gay men who are, you know, contracting this disease now is plummeting drastically. And I'm so happy and blessed and fortunate to be in a time period of that. But I remember when I came out to my parents, the first thing they had me do was go to an HIV test. Like the first thing. And they didn't even tell me. They told me we were just going to go to the doctor or something. And we were in the room, and I think I was 15 when I came out to my parents. And my mother just goes, we need to do an HIV test to the doctor. And he looked at me and he was like, this is still a child. Like, why is he needing to do that? And she couldn't even tell him. She was like, oh, we just need to do it. And funnily enough, she never even told me what the results were until I asked her like 3 weeks later. I was like, but I had to ask in such a way where I wasn't like too curious. I was like, Mom, by the way, like that test I did, is it all good? She goes, yeah. But it's so funny that like even in this day and age, like that is still such a fear that a lot of like gay men have. But since watching Pose and, you know, watching all these other stories and seeing like, it's so important to watch them to remember where we come from.
Yes.
And as young gay people, it's so important for us to remember the people that got us to where we are today. The fact that we have these medicines available and these tests so readily available is because there were a lot of beautiful gay, bisexual, pansexual, queer people that unfortunately passed away to get us to this point in life. So I think with a story like Rent but I'm a cheerleader and having, because I also did go through conversion therapy. And, you know, that's not something that straight people will ever be able to fully quantify what that feels like. And I think that's why having queer casts and queer creative teams and queer production teams are so intrinsic to that kind of beautiful storytelling. But
yeah. No, that's it's history stuff, and going back at things in the past are very difficult, I think, for us. I was thinking the same thing, actually. I mean, I come from a church background, and I guess perhaps some of my experiences within the church are quite similar to that. Not all church people and not all churches, but that, you know, there certainly is a lot of resistance, and actually that's a story that we still don't tell very often. You know, a lot of the things that happen from different backgrounds are, you know, kind of covered up a little bit. And the story that really, actually, you sang very beautifully a song from it at the concert we did last year. The musical that really changed that for me was The View Upstairs, which is a musical which is, and it is, you know, again, considering it's a very traumatic event that the musical is about. It's about the arson attack at the Upstairs Lounge in the 1970s, where an attack on a queer club where several queer people were killed. But the musical doesn't, that happens at the very, very end of the musical. And what the musical's about is exploring the characters that would have been in that space. And because seeing that on stage and understanding those characters and getting to know those characters and not just relying on the sort of stereotypes that are shown in film and television, or the way that film and television like to portray gay men. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, these people are just me. They're just me in a different generation. And it kind of made me very grateful and proud of those people that came before. And so I think musical theatre has a lot of, and theatre in general has a lot of things that it can do to kind of support representation in ways that are more than just let's put a gay person or let's put a queer person on stage. So from that, I'm interested to know what sort of stories you would like to see musical theatre tell.
You know what? I would actually love to see a character that is like fully pansexual or bisexual, and they're able to explore that in some sort of storytelling.
Yes.
Because I think, you know, in the LGBTQI plus community, bisexuals are very much kind of looked at as unicorns, like they don't really exist, or like pansexuality just kind of looked as, oh, you're just trying to be greedy and have a catch-all. But I think that like it is a very valid, you know, a way that people identify and see themselves at. And I would actually kind of love to see a character on stage kind of explore, you know, different sexes in terms of their love interests on stage and see like kind of where that leads. I think that'd be really fun.
That would be really cool. And I'd also love to see just casual love stories that just happen to be queer, that aren't there to, as much as it is amazing to see queer shows, a character doesn't need to be explored. They just happen to have, they could be, polyamorous, or they could be pansexual, they could be bisexual, and that's not a defining feature of them. That's just a matter of fact, and that just exists. And I think, like, even in these big Broadway shows, like, it would be great. I think there's lots of, like, even Elphaba and Glinda, like, they could have some sort of connection. Their love is, obviously platonic love is beautiful, but it could be more. And I'd love to see it just be oh, that's cool. That's amazing.
Have you ever seen the German production of Wicked?
I haven't.
Now, it's really interesting because the German production of Wicked, at least at a certain time, they really played into the relationship, a potential queer relationship between Elphaba and Glinda. And if you watch, I'll have to say, I'll link the clip in the episode, but there's a naughty bootleg version of, I think it's Jana Stelli's last performance as Glinda, and the way that they play for good, and it's Wilhelm Verchik, I think I'm saying that wrong, but she was playing Elphaba, and I find it very difficult to read that particular performance in any way other than queer, and it's clearly really, you know, it's really bubbling there, and all the way through. I mean, there's other clips online as well where you can see it, and I love the fact that production did that. And as far as I know, it's only ever happened in the German production. I've never seen it. I've never seen that kind of subtext when I've seen it in the UK or in the US. And it's really beautiful. And I think it is something that would be lovely to see played more. And I mean, the other thing when we're talking about bisexual and pansexual characters is, I'm very fond of saying this very often, but as far as I'm concerned, every character is bisexual unless otherwise stated. And I think if we could play it that way, then things would just be so much more interesting, and it's so much more freeing, and for people who are playing the roles as well, you know. And I think there's so much more room. The only thing I can think of where there's a bisexual character where it's really tried to be explored was If Then, which has this. I mean, it ruins it all because it has a really nasty throwaway line against bisexuals in it, unfortunately. But it has this really great setup where it's two alternate sliding doors. It's two alternate storylines. And in one storyline, one of the characters is with a man, and then the other storyline, one of the characters is with a woman. And so we see their bisexuality, and it's so frustrating. I get so cross about it because it's so well done. And then there's this one line that kind of undoes everything. But it would be great to see more of those sort of characters as well.
I'm going to be terrible because I can't remember the name of the writer. I've just discovered them on TikTok. They've written a musical where all of the parts are interchangeably ungendered. So it can be played by two women, it can play by two non-binary people.
Is it Gus Gowland, Mayflies?
Yes.
I've literally just done a podcast episode talking about that with Tanya.
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah, it's great. So
cool,
tell us a little bit more about your experience of Mayfly.
Yeah, I just think it's really special for a love story to truly be like genderless, and that's just being gorgeous. And I think you can pick any ages, right? You can pick any person's gender, and it can create any sexuality between those two people's gender. I don't actually know much about the musical, but I've listened to a few of the songs, and it's just beautiful. And I love that love can be so interchangeably fluid, and I think it's just such a cool idea for a musical. And I'd love to. I need to clearly do more research, but it's very interesting.
And it's one of the things actually that with a lot of the musicals that I link to on queermusicals.com is that it's really difficult sometimes to promote the musicals because they don't have cast albums, or they don't have, and that's not their fault. It's a funding thing, really. So trying to find ways to get people excited about these musicals and to encourage writers to put work, like you say, you've seen stuff on TikTok, to put some of the work out there. It's really important because it's so difficult, particularly in the current climate. It's very difficult to get these shows in a place where they are accessible to a great number of people. Mayfly was on in York, but there's only going to be a certain number of people that, if it's running for, 6 performances, there's only going to be a certain number of people that will be able to see that. And of course, the wish of the creative team is to try and find the next stage and the next stage. But I think anything we can do to support anything like that we see these new musicals, even if it is naming them in a podcast, I think it's still important.
Like, that is the beauty of social media. Like, it's amazing how... Think about something, it's not queer, but think about the Bridgerton musical, the unofficial one.
Yes.
That blew up overnight because they released one song, and then everyone just thought to themselves, what is this? I'm obsessed with it. And, the two girls, they just kept putting out more music and stuff, and it became this sensation, and they won a Grammy for it.
And they've written the music for Moana too.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is so amazing that Jess says, she was scrolling through TikTok and she's seen this video, and that's why I think that is maybe the way forward, especially because unfortunately for the UK musical theatre scene, there's not as much risk taken when it comes to like these new smaller writings, in the way that Broadway kind of, America takes a bit more of a chance and do like the off Broadway stuff. We don't really have things like that, but that's why I'm so thankful for producers like Paul, who has basically used the Other Palace to launch all these new writing and new musicals and stuff, and we need more people who are willing to take the risk to do that. But I think social media, and as you says, talking about in podcasts and just liking, sharing, tagging people and things. So I implore people to keep posting things on TikTok as well, because it seems like people get famous overnight from TikTok now, almost, and I don't see why we couldn't, as a musical theatre industry, tap into that as well.
If you want to follow us on social media, you can use queer.musicals on Instagram or Facebook, or you can follow me at Dr. James Lovelock on Instagram.
One thing that I'm really interested in is there is I'm going to be bad like Jessica, I need to look up his name, but he is making a queer black musical, which is the story of Romeo and Juliet, but told through like voguing.
Oh my goodness, this is so cool.
Yeah. And it's just, it's so cool because there's one, there's this one song, and I think the lyric is like, I'm going to be the next Miss Capulet. But he's like, it's voguing and dipping and stuff. And it's just like really cool that you're taking this story that everyone knows and can, see as a classic story, but you're retelling it from a hot, young, queer, black perspective, and something which is like voguing and ballroom culture, which at the core was like the start of, like a new queer revolution in Paris and in New York and all these places. And I think it's such an interesting idea to amalgamate the two. And funnily enough, there's a production of Cats the musical, where they're doing the Jellicle Ball as a voguing ball again. And I think that's so cool. And the thing that I love most about voguing, sorry, I'm kind of rambling now, is that it's this art form that has been around for ages, but is now having this kind of like new, I don't want to say resurrection because it didn't go anywhere, but I feel like that a lot of young new queer people are kind of like catching on to ballroom culture now, and they're seeing and learning so many things about themselves through balls. And I think it's something that's so unique, especially to black queer people, that I'm all for it.
Excellent. Is it Justin Ross?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yes. Again, I'll try and put a link to that on the episode, because one of the things that I've been trying to find more of is musicals that are specifically written by Black queer people or for Black queer people.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I'm really keen to do is to make sure that nobody feels left out. And within the queer community, we've been very guilty of making it white gay men focused. And there is, of course, a place for that, because for a very long time there wasn't anything for white gay men either. But we must make sure that we're seeing everybody represented.
Yeah.
And so I'm always on the lookout for new musicals. One of the ones I really enjoyed was Leave to Remain, which was a musical which was the music was written by Kelly Okereke, who was from Block Party, and it was only on for a really short time at the Lyric Hammersmith, and it was a musical about an interracial relationship, and it went into a lot about the kind of the black lived experience, as well as somebody who was an immigrant from America, a white American. And it was a really fascinating musical, and the music was very different in style. It was the choreography was very different in style, and those musicals, those sort of stories are so important. But again, it's about where can we put this? How can we kind of uplift this so that more people know about it? Because there is kind of like a recording of it. I don't know if it's a cast recording or whether it's like a demo recording of it, but you don't get the full thing from that because it's such a visual musical. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that we kind of look for these things and find these new things, which musical theatre fans have always been so good at doing anyway.
Yeah.
That's how we end up with things like Ratatouille the musical, or things that we really, really wouldn't expect necessarily to have a huge following, and suddenly, because of the people, the community that we are in musical theatre, these things, grow. So there's definitely the possibility to do that, I think.
Yeah.
I think TikTok is unique almost. I think I've just never found a platform like it where you can be seen by so many strangers. Instagram, it tends to be people who already follow you, people already familiar with you, or people who are very familiar with your friends. Whereas TikTok, you can be accessed by the whole entire world. And I think, and not that writers should write so that people do covers, but if people are covering your work or if people are wanting to sing your work, it will go everywhere. Take Joy Woods in The Notebook. Anyone is singing that song right now, and I know sometimes the point of work isn't so it is covered and so it is easy to sing or hard to sing or a show-off song, but that is like putting things out there is really good. And I do understand why, but also I wish people did film some of their musical so that it could be seen. But I also understand that does maybe detract. Maybe people wouldn't want to go watch it. I don't know if that's happened with Heathers. I don't know with after that being a fully filmed production that the show still exists, because Waitress, that's come out since it's closed. I don't know how many other films has affected ticket sales, but
it doesn't seem to have affected everybody who's talking about Jamie.
Yeah,
or Hamilton. Hamilton put out there
and that
as
was
well.
the exact Broadway production. Yeah,
and I think in some ways there's also the argument that it will encourage more people to go and see it because with the ticket prices being so high, people want to know that they're going to enjoy it. So there will be some people who watch it on the film and go, oh, actually, no, I'm not going to see that because that's not my sort of story at all.
Yeah.
But equally, there'll be people who watch it on film and go, oh, yeah, that is really good.
Yeah.
I want to go and see what this is like in a theatre now.
Yeah, because you're right. There is a difference between, sitting in your living room or in your bedroom and watching that recording on TV versus being in that theatre live and in person. And, we always say when we do these Q&As in between our Wicked shows, when we have these students come in, and we always say every single show that is done, there will never be another show like it.
Yes.
Because of the atmosphere, the audience, just little factors, costumes, like the people that are working on the crew that day. Everything has a knock-on effect to the overall magic of live theatre, and that is why it is so magical. So I think people will definitely still come out and see these things. So I think in a way it will always be a tool to help. I don't think it would ever hinder.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Segueing back, I do think we don't see enough trans people on stage.
Yeah.
Or trans stories. Or roles written for trans people. Or roles that could be played, I guess many roles, any role could be played by anyone. But often they aren't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with
And
that.
tell stories.
And there's, I think the frustrating thing for me is that there is a lot of work out there. And with the concert, again, the concert that Josh was involved with last year, we definitely, there were musicals like Unicorn, Brother, and then there's writers like Preston Max Allen and Jay Jarrett and all sorts of American writers. I only know about this because literally it's been my job to research them for the last 5 years. But trying to find ways, again, with a lot of these things, there are exceptions with this, I think, but with a lot of these things, I think the work is there. It's just now, what do we do with it? How can we get it to a stage where more people know about it and more people are seeing it? And I think this is the other thing that I've found is I think, again, I've probably said this before on the podcast, but just because a show isn't about me doesn't mean to say that I shouldn't go and see it. And I have made that mistake so many times. I remember with Deaf West, we're doing Spring Awakening, one of the very first times I went across to New York, and I thought, oh no, that's a show for deaf people, that's not for me. And then when I subsequently learned more about it and seen it, I just thought, what a loss that was for me not going to see that. And so now I'm really keen to make sure that I go and see things like Leave to Remain, which may not necessarily be directly relevant to me. It's really, I think that's really important as well, that we support work that we is not necessarily about us, if that makes sense.
Were they the production that did a production of The Hunchback of Notre Dame?
I think it was a different company,
right? Okay.
That did Hunchback of Notre Dame, but Joshua Castile played that role, who was also in Spring Awakening as well. And I think subsequently John McGinn originated that role as well. And they are queer deaf actors, and they talk a lot about how important that role was for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, Deaf West are great. Deaf West have done all sorts of things, plays, musicals, all sorts of things. Spring Awakening was probably the one that's best known, but they also did Big River and all sorts of other adaptations. But it's really important that we kind of have this sort of representation, I think.
Yeah, I think we could even incorporate more of that stuff in the musicals that we kind of already do now. I remember 2 moments I can think off the top of my head that because we can talk about in Pride Month being inclusive, and I know this month is for queer people and stuff like that, but I think it also, there's a knock-on effect to different leveled abled people and stuff that also fall under the umbrella of needing to see representation and inclusivity.
Yes.
And I remember I went and saw the recent production of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when it was on tour, and I saw it at the New Midland Theatre.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so interesting that the mum, every time she said a line or sung a song, she was doing she was signing.
Yes.
And I saw Little Big Things. And I think that is just a mixture of, queer, differently abled people that I also thought kind of blew me away because, again, they had moments in the show, where you can really tell that they took the time and the care to incorporate signing, but also just using talented actors of, different backgrounds and stuff like that. And I thought it was amazing. And my favorite character of the whole show, I need to look up what her name is, but she played the physiotherapist in the musical. She won the Olivier Award for it. And I think she's so incredible because she is a wheelchair user, and it just goes to show you that her and that character, that you can do anything. It's not a hindrance. In fact, it's probably an asset, and she just gets to authentically be herself on a stage. And I think in the month of Pride, we can all be proud of things like that. So more inclusivity, please.
Absolutely. And this podcast will probably not be going out in the month of Pride, but that's great because actually I'm not just gay in June.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Gay all the time.
So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was thinking about Ali Stroker, who was the first actor on Broadway to win a Tony as a wheelchair user, and has done so much amazing work on various things. So there are so many people, and is also part of the LGBTQ community as well. And there's so many people, and one of the things that frustrates me, and I was talking about this on another podcast today, but one of the things that frustrates me is that we're only allowed one box. So I can't be in the queer box and in the disabled box. I can only be in the queer box. And, and I think we often find that, and, musicals are only allowed to be about one thing. And that's why I think we sometimes end up with not having as well-rounded representation as we might do.
But more on that. Like, why can't we rewrite Les Mis and have the main characters sign? Why can't we?
Yeah.
Why can't wouldn't change the blocking. It wouldn't change anything. It literally wouldn't change anything. I do think a lot of theatres and rakes aren't built for wheelchair users. That needs to change.
Yes.
Yeah. I just because it is, change it then. It just can't be. I think I can't imagine how it must be to look up and never see yourself ever.
Yes.
And I'm a white bisexual. I do see some of myself up there. It must be a completely unique experience for everyone else, but it just needs to change.
Yeah.
And I do hate that it is put on the people themselves to make that louder. It is minorities. You have to speak louder for some reason. I just don't understand because everyone else is too afraid to overstep. I don't know, but it needs to, completely needs to change.
I think you're right. I think the infrastructure is one thing about it, the theatres, but we have found ways to deal with it. It's just that it needs to be a higher priority, perhaps, than it already is. So I'm going to ask one more question just to finish off. Are there other queer stories from other media that you think would work as a musical? Because one of the things that I've struggled with quite a lot is that musical theatre is an adaptive form, which means that it's nearly always, well, at the moment it seems to be very obsessed with stories from the 1980s, which need to be updated. So I'm really interested whether there are queer stories that would be interesting to explore theatrically.
I think something like Heartstopper, because I think the reason why Heartstopper was as immediately popular as it was because when I saw things on social media, on TikTok, looking at watching it on Netflix as well, a lot of the comments from a lot of people were actually from older queer people themselves saying that they never had a representation in a TV show or a movie where it showed two young people discovering that kind of love for themselves at that age. Because I know I don't speak for everyone, but me myself, I didn't even the idea of trying to date someone at that age was so far away from me because I didn't even know who I was, and I was so scared of discovering who I was at that age that the last thing I was really doing is trying to find a healthy form of love at the age of 15 and 16, and I think it was just so beautiful to watch a story that was very simple in nature, but it meant so much to so many people because, again, you had young people now who are seeing themselves being represented and seeing proudly, and it's a love that is actually a beautiful thing. And then you had a lot of people from the older generation watching that and thinking, I'm so glad that younger people get to see that.
Yes.
It's something that I wish I had for myself, and I'm so glad that we have come this far, that I'm seeing something like this be on a platform like Netflix that is worldwide, and so many people are actually receiving this show in a positive way. So I think something like Heartstopper would be beautiful on stage. I can't really think of, off the top of my head, any musicals that really explore that young kind of teenage queer love. So I think that would definitely fill a gap right now.
And the market loves it. We love stories about high school. We love stories about, especially if ones can be healing. And what Mean Girls, Heathers, we've got. But that would be, and you're right, it is different. I know we are very, very privileged to say that in this country. It is different. I know some people still might feel that way. It's very different to the rest of the world. But I worked at a school over lockdown, and they had a pride club.
Oh,
they were walking around with flags. We had trans and non-binary students who didn't feel ostracized or weird or creepy or anything that was ever spoken negatively. And it was so healing for me to be such a proud out teacher and see my wonderful group of it was just I think it is a different world, and I'm really, really excited for it. And I think telling their stories would be wonderful. Yeah. I'm actually writing a musical right now. Little plug. It's very, very early, but it is about a true story about my two friends who didn't know their sexuality, met on a show, became best friends, and on their final night just said, "I'm really going to miss you." And they've been together for 7 years, and they'd never, ever thought about that or thought about that side of them, that out loud, or ever explored that. And I just think something simple and beautiful about just loving that person for everything they are, no matter what they are. And I'd love to explore other themes of pansexuality within that realm, and I will take creative license. I hope they're okay with that. But yeah, I want to just tell a simple story about love and friendship turning into beautiful love. Yeah. Whoa, plug from me.
No, that's brilliant though, but I really look forward to finding out more about that. Yeah.
Let's hope it grows.
Yeah. And actually, you know, that is one of the things, is that quite often these stories will come from us as creatives and writers. And I'd encourage anyone listening, if you think you've got a story or that you would like to adapt, or a story that's your own, or a true story, whatever, then write the musicals, send them to, you know, send them to
please.
us, send them to...
Yeah, we'll sing them.
But you know, these are the important things. This is where we are now, is that we're starting to get to the stage where the demand for queer musicals is far higher than the supply of them. And I think there is so much space for us to develop this sort of writing. So yeah, exciting futures, we hope. And thank you both so much for joining us on the podcast today. And thank you very much to everyone for listening, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
On the next episode of Represent, the queermusicals.com podcast, we'll be off to New York, and we'll be interviewing the actress L. Morgan Lee. This episode will be published on Monday, the 5th of August. See you there.